little button. Normally, we start doing pre-service announcements a few minutes before service. So if you're in the sanctuary, if you could quiet down a little, that'd be great. Please. I don't think they're paying attention. I'm going to do some pre-service announcements, if you could quiet down. Please. No, that's why I question if this is good. Well, thank you, Cory. Anyway, we're going to have some pre-service announcements before Cory does a prelude for our service. The board is recruiting for several leadership positions, including president-elect, program council chair, and also the finance council, plan giving, and stewardship committees. If you're interested, or if you know anyone who might be interested, please contact either myself, Leslie Vissage, John Hoskins, or Elaine Faithful. And even if you're not sure, just ask us about what's involved and we'd be glad to talk to you. The next thing is a little bit more urgent because the deadline is coming up Sunday, August 10th, which is a week from today, and that's circle dinners. So if you're interested in circle dinners, or if you just want to know more, if you want to sign up, there's a big yellow poster in the social room, and you can add your name to the list either as an alternative or as a host. And if you're interested in just learning what this is all about, Jackie Renzi is usually here for the service. Please see her. If she was here, I'd ask her to raise her hand, but I don't see her in the sanctuary. So that is the two announcements. You will find more on the back of your order of service and in the weekly, and please look at both of those when you have a chance. And now Cory, who was kindly paying attention, will now have a beautiful prelude. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Clemson. We are located on the land of the Eastern Band of the Cherokee and the Southern Iroquois. Here at UUFC, we welcome all who come seeking a spiritual home, whether this is your 100th time or your first. If you happen to be a first-time visitor, we would love to get to know you. And if you're here for the first time or first few times and you want to stand and introduce yourself, please do so. Anybody who's here for the first time? Oh, there is. Well, wait for the microphone, which Tom will bring you. That way people online can hear you. And there's people in the back who are listening.
Hello, hello. Hi, everybody. My name is Micah, and I grew up in Seneca, and I've been living in various places. The last 20 years, I've been living in intentional communities out in Missouri. And my mother is aging. She's in Seneca, and I just recently, last month, moved back to live with her and support her for a while. And I'm just kind of looking for my people. So here I am.
Welcome.
I think some of you might be my people.
Welcome.
Thanks.
And there is a welcome table right outside the sanctuary where you can find more information about us. And if you're able to and would like to, there's conversation and coffee and refreshments after the service in the social room. So if you're viewing us, and I don't know if we're online yet or if it's still going to be after the fact on YouTube, but if you view us online, you can receive our newsletter by visiting our website or emailing the office. The website is uufc.org, and you can learn more about us there.
Good morning. I'm glad to see you all here. My name is Tom Hiebel. My pronouns are he and him. And we're going to open today with a statement from Article 2. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systematic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions within our congregation, our association, and society at large. Let us rise in body, mind, or spirit and sing together hymn 346, Come Sing a Song with Me.
I'd now like Charlie, who agreed to help us by lighting the chalice, to come and do that for us. And I'd like everyone to join me in reading the words of affirmation, which are in the order of service. We gather together in a spirit of love with justice as our guide. This is our chosen covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth with freedom, and to care for one another.
Actually, most of you may know me as Karen's husband, and that's who I really am right now. This morning we're going to have a slightly different time for all ages. It's a song. It's written by Peggy Seeger, she has a brother whose song was covered by the Byrds, but she wrote this song, and I think it'll set up some things for us later. So let's hit it.
When I was a little girl, I wished I was a boy. I tagged along behind the gang and wore my corduroys. Everybody said I only did it to annoy, but I was gonna be an engineer. Mama told me, can't you be a lady? Your duty is to make me the mother of a pearl. Wait until you're older, dear, then maybe you'll be glad that you're a girl. Dainty as a Dresden statue, gentle as a Jersey cow, smooth as silk, gives creamy milk. Learn to coo, learn to moo. That's what you do to be a lady now. When I went to school, I learned to write and how to read, some history, geography, and home economy. And typing is a skill that every girl is sure to need, to while away the extra time until the time to breathe. And then they had the nerve to say, what would you like to be? I says, I'm gonna be an engineer. No, you only need to learn to be a lady. The duty isn't yours for to try and run the world. An engineer could never have a baby. Remember, dear, that you're a girl. She's smart for a woman. I wonder how she got that way. You get no choice, you get no voice. Just stay mum, pretend you're dumb, and that's how you come to be a lady today. Jimmy came along and we set up a conjugation. We were busy every night with love and recreation. I spent the day at work so he could get his education. Now he's an engineer. He says, I know you'll always be a lady. It's the duty of my darling to love me all her life. Could an engineer look after or obey me? Remember, dear, that you're my wife. As soon as Jimmy got a job, then I began again. Happy at my turret lathe a year or so, and then the morning that the twins were born, and Jimmy says to them, kids, your mother was an engineer. Well, you owe it to the kids to be a lady. Dainty as a dish rag, faithful as a child. Stay at home, you got to mind the baby. Remember, you're a mother now. Well, every time I turn around, it's something else to do. It's cook a meal or mend a sock or sweep a floor or two. Listening to Jimmy Young, it makes me want to spew, 'cause I was gonna be an engineer. I really wish that I could be a lady. I could do the lovely things a lady's supposed to do. I wouldn't even mind if only they would pay me. Then I could be a person too. What price for a woman? You could buy her with a ring of gold. To love and obey without any pay. You get a cook and a nurse, for better or worse. You don't need a purse when the lady is sold. Now the times are harder and me Jimmy's got the sack. Well, I went down to Vickers, they were glad to have me back. But I'm a third-class citizen, my wages tell me that. And I'm a first-class engineer. My boss, he says we pay you as a lady. You only got the job 'cause I can't afford a man. With you I keep the profits high as maybe. You're just a cheaper pair of hands. You got one fault, you're a woman, not worth the equal pay. A bitch or a tart, you're nothing but heart. Shallow and vain, you got no brain. You even go down the drain like a lady today. Well, I listened to my mother and I joined the typing pool. I listened to my lover and I put him through his school. But if I listen to the boss, well then I'm just a bloody fool. and an underpaid engineer. I've been a sucker ever since I was a baby, as a daughter, as a wife, a mother and a dear. But I'll fight them as a woman, not a lady. I'll fight them as an engineer. Peggy Seeger. What a badass. I'll see you next week.
I don't know about anyone else, but I can relate to a lot of that video. I wasn't an engineer, I was an entomologist, and when I started, there weren't many women, so I can relate. Now is the time in our service that we collect an offering to give towards the financial vitality of this community. Also, 25% of our collection that we get, the cash collection, goes to a local community in the local community that we partner with. And for the month of August, it will be the Ripple of One. For those who know anything about them, you can go to their website and learn more. For those at home and any that wish to donate online, you can go to our website, UUFC.org, and use the donate button. There you'll see options for either paying your pledge or donating towards the organizations that we partner with. We also collect non-perishable foods each week that go to the Clemson Community Cares Food Bank. And the children who are here can help us by collecting canned goods that people may have brought to our service. And we thank you, as always, for your generosity. Now is the time in our service for our joys and concerns. The journey of life brings pleasures and pains, satisfactions and regrets. As persons who are seeking truth and meaning, our everyday task is one of honoring such experiences, as well as integrating them. We fit the pieces together, and in doing so, find larger shape our lives are reaching towards. Part of this process of making meaning can be found in the rituals of joys and concerns. I've asked Tom to add a stone for each of these joys and sorrows into the bowl, which represents our shared community. I have one, and I see Paul is still writing, so we'll wait on that one, but I'll read this one first. This is from Karen York. Her sorrow is that Michael's brother Bill is waiting for a transfer to Greenville's Electrophoresis Center for a pacemaker and Karen, how do you pronounce that? Defibrillator implant after requiring cardio inversion shock. And this is from Paula. Her joy and sorrow is that there was a beautiful celebration of life of Priscilla Phillips yesterday at the Greenville, I guess U2, and she was a longtime member here at UUFC. have in the way of joys and sorrows that were submitted. But there's one final stone for any joy or concern that people are holding in their heart, and for those who are not with us this morning.
A brief musical meditation that Cory's going to play for us. This morning I would like to talk with you about the first principle and respect. The first principle of Unitarian Universalism is to affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. But one may ask, on what basis do all persons have inherent worth and dignity? One could answer, because they're persons and all persons have inherent worth and dignity. This is obviously circular and is equivalent to claiming that human beings have rights because they are human beings without any basis for why human beings should have rights. However, our fourth principle enjoins a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, which would seem to demand a better foundation than just because. Now, there are some people who regard human rights as being conferred to us from God. I'm not going to address this claim. Although I'd like to point out that if this were true, human beings would not have inherent rights, only conferred rights, i.e. rights that only exist because some other being gave them to us. Instead, I believe there is a rational basis for claiming persons do have inherent worth and dignity. For this basis to be inherent, it must be part of the person themselves, and for Kant, the defining aspect of being a person is the capacity to act morally. That is, the capacity to choose to impose upon oneself rules that you recognize everyone should follow, not because you benefit, but simply because it is the right thing to do. Many people recognize this idea when they are asked why they did something and reply, "I did it as a matter of principle." When someone acts on principle, they're claiming the ability to make themselves do what is right, even if it is to their disadvantage, because they value doing right above all. This ability to make yourself do what you recognize as right, to impose the moral law upon oneself, is where morality exists. For morality does not exist as a set of rules. It is brought into being by persons choosing to act morally. Therefore, the rational basis for the first principle for claiming that persons have inherent worth and dignity is that persons have the capacity to choose to act morally. From this perspective, it is not that every person exercises this capacity, rather it is their possession of the capacity to, through their choice, bring the moral law into existence which demands respect. For Kant, this is expressed in the second formulation of the categorical imperative: act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of another, always at the same time as an end and never simply as a means. If someone has inherent worth and dignity, then they should not be treated as a means to gratifying your desires. Rather, what you are required to do is respect their capacity to bring morality into existence. You're required to respect their ability to freely choose to do things like telling the truth for its own sake. Now, acting purely on the basis of what is the right thing to do is not easy. One may doubt whether such a thing is possible. One may doubt whether there is such a thing as free will. One may believe with Hume that reason cannot act independently of our desires. But what Kant is claiming is that for morality to be possible, there must be things whose will is able to choose which rules will determine their actions. So if I believe that persons can act morally, I'm committed to believing in the freedom of the will to put aside the influences of my desires and to believe that my choice to do what is right can be a sufficient cause of my action. Why should I, as an individual, treat persons as having inherent worth? Because the existence of persons makes morality possible. Morality is not a set of rules imposed by some authority. It is freely made choices to do what is right for its own sake. If there were no persons, there would be nothing that could be moral agents, and if there are no moral agents, there's no morality. So the first principle demands that the inherent worth and dignity of each person should be recognized. I would say the basis of that dignity is that persons are capable of moral agency. This, I think, is the firm foundation upon which the first principle rests. The foundation rests upon respecting the ability of each person to act morally. The first principle can also be thought of as the foundation of other UU principles. The first principle forms the basis for the second principle: justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Why should we fight for justice, equity, and compassion? Because each person has inherent worth and dignity. Their needs and standing in society should be addressed as part of recognizing them as ends in themselves, that you should respect them as persons. There are a myriad of ways that people can show disrespect towards others. Some have to do with individual people having malicious feelings towards others and intending to do them harm. Clearly, in such circumstances, those with malicious intent do not see the persons that they are harming as worthy of respect. Well, I'm out of order. This harm is sometimes physical, sometimes psychological, sometimes fatal, and I would argue that someone who physically abuses or murders persons does not respect their inherent worth and dignity of the one who is abused or killed. The frequency of people being physically abused and killed in relation to their skin color has been so great in our culture that it was necessary to create the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, which remembers the numerous lynching victims between 1877 and 1950. An initiative called the Community Remembrance Project erected a memorial to Anthony Crawford in Abbeville. Anthony Crawford, who was beaten, stabbed, shot, and hung after arguing with a white merchant about the price of cotton seeds. Days after the lynching, the white citizens voted to expel the family and seize their land. So obviously not all people impose rules upon themselves which require respecting others. Also, obviously, if they are choosing on the basis of race, they do not see their victims as having equal moral worth to themselves, and they allow themselves to treat persons as things to be disposed of, like trash. I also think that this is what we have in mind when we say that an individual is a racist, a homophobe, a sexist, a bigot, and clearly there are such people. What is more confusing is what systematic racism or oppression would mean. In Article 2, we covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systematic oppression. But what are we covenanting to dismantle? How can we recognize systemic racism and oppression? And what everyday actions can we take to dismantle these cultural structures? I think the systematic nature is easiest to recognize when you read the apocalyptic futures foreseen if equal respect were granted in the law to marginalized groups. This form of oppression does not even depend upon malice. In fact, some people are so confused by the term systematic racism, they believe it is the claim that everyone in society is someone who has malicious feelings towards others and wishes to harm them on the basis of their skin color. These people feel as though they're being accused of being a malicious racist, but this is a confusion. So if someone were to say that redlining is an example of systemic racism, they're not saying that each individual banker was a malicious racist. Rather, the rules that they were instructed to follow were directed at and harmed African Americans. We now know that redlining neighborhoods was done intentionally and that this harmed African Americans financially for decades. The system did not depend upon each person in the country being a malicious racist. During the practice, there were people who recognized it for what it was and fought it. Even bank loan officers may not have liked the process. However, it was how the banking system worked. So we're talking about societal structures, not individual feelings. I believe you can recognize the systemic nature when you see how people are imagining how society would be destroyed if these marginalized groups were treated with equal respect. A couple of years ago, before the hoopla about DEI came along, critical race theory was the bugaboo source which was indoctrinating children into believing leftist ideology. We know critical race theory was never taught to school children, and you'd have to advance fairly far to be exposed outside of graduate school. So what did these radicals claim? This is from the Legal Defense Fund. The scholarly framework holds that racism goes far beyond just individually held prejudices, that is in fact a systemic phenomenon woven into the laws and institutions of the nation. So what kind of proof can be given that this is the case? I think the easiest example is the apocalyptic vision of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court gives in his opinion in the Dred Scott decision. The Chief Justice was Roger Brooke Taney. Justice Taney was born into a slave-owning family, but claimed to hate slavery. He freed his slaves, provided pensions for them. As such, I don't think this apocalyptic vision is the result of malice. Instead, he sees the whole structure of society as being destroyed if you grant African Americans the same legal standing as white men. Taney starts by referring to the founding fathers from slave-owning states and their intentions. This apocalyptic vision comes after a lengthy discussion of how racial status has been encoded into law from the Constitution on. That's not the worst part. Look at what would happen to the country. Quote, "It cannot be supposed that they, the slave-owning states, intended to secure to them, African American rights and privileges and rank in the new political body throughout the Union, which every one of them denied within the limits of its own dominion. More especially, it cannot be believed that large slave-owning states regarded them as included in the word citizens, or would have consented to a constitution that might compel them to receive them in that character from another state. For if they were so received and entitled to the privileges and immunities of citizens, it would exempt them from the special laws and from the police regulations which they, the slave-owning states, considered to be necessary for their own safety. It would give to persons of the Negro race who were recognized as citizens in any one state of the Union the right to enter every other state whenever they pleased, singly or in companies, without pass or passport, without obstruction, to sojourn there as long as they pleased, to go where they pleased at every hour of the day or night without molestation, unless they committed some violation of the law for which a white man would be punished, unless they could, and it would give them the full liberty of speech in public and in private upon all subjects which its own citizens might speak, to hold public meetings upon political affairs, and to keep and carry arms wherever they went. And all of this would be done in the face of the subject race of the same color, both free and slaves, inevitably producing discontent and insubordination among them, and endangering the peace and the safety of the whole state. I think Justice Taney's opinion gives credence to critical race theory. He claimed the law demanded his decision. He was writing for the highest legal authority in the United States of America, the Supreme Court. So systemic racism doesn't require that all members of society as individuals be malicious racists. What proof can we give? I give you Justice Taney. And if you want to, I think, understand the current Department of Justice, I would go and read Justice Taney's full opinion. There's an echo that we were expressing. Of course, systemic racism doesn't confine itself to only one group. In the 1970s, a radical proposal was made, the Equal Rights Amendment. This is what the Equal Rights Amendment said. Section 1, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. Section 2, the Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. There were people who opposed this amendment. Among these people was a woman named Phyllis Schlafly, who, despite claims of conservative censorship, came to my college to spread her venom. Listen to what she imagines would happen if the ERA were to pass. Quote, what the homosexuals and lesbians have failed to achieve at the federal, state, and local levels, they're planning on accomplishing through the Equal Rights Amendment. While no one can predict with absolute certainty how the U.S. Supreme Court will rule on any issue, the leading authorities are convinced the ERA would legalize homosexual marriages and grant them the special rights and privileges given by law to husbands and wives. One reason for this is the language of the Equal Rights Amendment, which says equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. A homosexual teacher who could argue persuasively that to deny him a school job would be discrimination on account of sex. A second reason for the effect of ERA on homosexuality is the fact that it would require state legislatures or the courts to delete sexist language from state laws, man, woman, etc., and replace all with sex-neutral language such as person or spouse. Thus, a law that defines marriage as a union of a man and a woman would have to be amended to replace those words with person. Now, I don't know if Mrs. Schlafly had malicious feelings towards homosexuals, but what she's imagining is like the destruction of everything she thinks holds our society together. When she refers, go back. Well, try 4. The one that has all the marriage things on it. There we have the Equal Rights Amendment. One more. Go one more again. Oh, try one more. There we go. So these are the special things that Phyllis Schlafly is talking about. that she wants restricted to only heterosexual marriages. And if you look at them, things like medical and next of kin rights. And so she's explicitly arguing for not allowing people to have rights which she has. If we go back one. There we go. That's I'm trying. Mrs. Shapley, as she would prefer to be called Mrs. because she mocked women who went by Ms. to have better job prospects, clearly believes the ERA will destroy society at large because it would extend the same rights to others which do not currently have them. So we might ask, with Mrs. Shapley, why someone would want to be referred to as Miss as opposed to Mrs. Algo. And one reason for that was historically, back one, was that your marital status could affect your job prospects because married women, everyone thought, would have children, and children are inconvenient for businesses. And up through the 1970s, it was perfectly legal to fire women for being pregnant. So if you're applying for a job, why might you not want someone to know your marital status? It's because you're trying to get a job. So the history of firing women for having children is long and ingrained. The truth is, if someone prefers to be called Ms. rather than Miss or Mrs., we don't know the reasons why that choice was made, but it would seem the most basic way you could respect another person's inherent worth and dignity would be to address people and talk about them in the manner they prefer. To deliberately disregard that the person's preference is to be deliberately disrespectful. If someone prefers to be called Ms., call them Ms. On reflection, refusing to address someone in the manner they prefer is perhaps the most prevalent instance of disrespect in our culture. A while ago, commentators on TV started refusing to call Jill Biden, PhD, as Dr. Biden, saying she was not a real doctor. Various politicians made a game of mangling Kamala Harris's name as a sign of disrespect. The first exposure for most of us in experiencing this phenomenon was on the school playground when people mocked your name while bullying you. Some people might even declare, "You can't make me respect you and treat you with dignity." In fact, they seem to be defending the right to treat persons disrespectfully. And such people miss the point. The point is that you should make yourself respect me and treat me with dignity, because that's the simplest way of acknowledging someone's worth and dignity. The importance of doing so is a matter of public health. Through suicide prevention, people who are persistently disrespected, unsurprisingly, have higher rates of depression. In fact, the proper way of understanding why people are coming out to society and telling you how they want to be addressed is a matter of public health and self-preservation. Health effects demonstrated between not being addressed in the manner you prefer to be addressed are striking. Find the graph. There you go. So this is the suicide attempts amongst transgender people. And the different columns, this is whether people are addressing you in the manner that you want to be addressed. Down here, where it's only 10%, it's all or most people do. Over at the far end, none of the people do. We're up at 23%. And so I could argue at this point that it's just a matter of public health But I'm speaking today about the first principle and the small things we can do that affect those who are marginalized. So, when somebody tells you who they are and how they wish to be addressed, the proper thing to do would be to introduce yourself and how you would like to be addressed, and then address them and refer to them in their preferred manner. It may seem annoying to some people, others may think it's silly, and some may think that people are just being difficult when their habitually acquired linguistic patterns are disrupted. I believe that when people are subject to laws and customs which specifically target their standing as equal citizens, I would say this is systematic oppression. If you were to ask me why I thought suicide rates are higher in LGBT youth and adults and other marginalized groups in general, I think the answer is straightforward. When you live in a culture which refuses to treat you with respect, unsurprisingly, it has a negative effect on you psychologically. Peggy Seeger captured this disrespect for women's choices, which were counter to societal roles. Everyone expected her to be a girl, a lady, a wife, and a dear. Each of her societal roles were determined without her input, and each had things which people expected her to do or to accept as her proper function in life. What no one did was respect her wish to become an engineer or respect the wish to be treated equally in the workplace. I would say neither her mother, her husband, nor even her boss had malicious intent. I'm sure her mother thought her advice was what was best for her daughter, that her husband loved her, or even the boss just saw her as cheaper labor. Nevertheless, it is clear that these societal structures were not in accord with her wishes. They did not treat her as an end in herself. So what is the least thing you can do when you meet someone to show respect for another person's capacity to act morally? What is the least thing you can do in a culture which constantly feels compelled to be disrespectful to groups of people? What is the smallest thing to do that you can do to help people cope with the constant disrespect they receive from society at large and to respect their dignity? If you believe in the inherent worth and dignity of each person, you should address them in the manner they prefer. You can show them respect. And if your religious beliefs or your personal beliefs require you to intentionally refuse to respect a person's preferred mode of address, to intentionally disrespect a person, then I believe you should seriously re-examine your religious or personal beliefs. And I invite you to now join me in singing hymn 188, Come Whoever You Are. We're going to go through it twice. Words come from W.E.B. Du Bois, and it's a section from him. Hither, the social conscience must come without wavering, without compromise. In a world of men, even of differing and different men, we cannot, on account of cowardice, treat any of these men as less than men. We cannot slink back of Darwinism to discover excuses or whiten our lies by laying them on the Lord. If you have aspirations above the dirt, why may not your coachman? If you in choking narrowness stretch groping arms for air, why may not the hod carrier be dissatisfied too? If you count yourself as something more than your money, why may not I? To induce then in men a consciousness of the humanity of all men, of the sacred unity in all diversity, is not merely to lay down a pious postulate, but is the active and animate heart-to-heart knowledge of your neighbors, high and low, black and white, employer and employed. It means a firm planting of human ideals, the training of children to be through their doing and not simply to do through their being. The setting of our faces like flint against the modern heresy that money makes the man, and a reverent listening, not simply to the first line, but the last line of Emerson's quatrain. There is no great, no small, to the soul that maketh all. Where it cometh, all things are, and it cometh everywhere. And now I guess I extinguish the chalice. May you go in peace and return in love.